Well, to talk about all this, we're now joined by our political strategist, Susan Smith, a Liberal strategist, co-founder and principal at Blue Sky Strategy Group. Cole Hogan is a Conservative strategist, and George Sewell, former NDP Director of Communications, now founder and principal at On Step Strategies. Hello to the three of you.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Okay, so here we have it, the Parliament rising for its winter holiday break. Good time to do an assessment with the Prime Minister 8 months into the job. He has moved on a number of his priorities, but I would also make the argument that his priorities has exposed divisions within the Liberal caucus. How would you assess this time period and how the Prime Minister has done, Susan?
Well, the time period as Prime Minister, the whole year. I mean, it's been quite the year, right? And I'm a whole lot happier at the end of this year than I was in January. I can tell you when the Liberals were 20 points behind and Justin Trudeau stepped down and we didn't know what was going to happen. So a lot has happened, including Mark Carney winning the leadership and then coming in as Prime Minister. And I think he's executed well for someone who is new to politics, new to this kind of public life, launched into the middle of a trade maelstrom, I would say, with Donald Trump and then the rest of the globe trying to sort it all out. I think he's done all right. He's trying to pivot the Canadian economy to build Canada strong. Those are his words that he chooses. But laying the groundwork for major projects, in putting down a budget in place that's saying that we're going to use Canadian materials to build Canadian things, investing in the military, raising people's pay in the military, trying to build more houses, those kinds of things. I think that's a good start, given a year where the big loud roar from the U.S. has been constant, but with no ability to predict what will happen next.
Mm-hmm. Cole, what do you make of the Prime Minister's first 8 months?
Yeah, well, to Susan's point, what a year indeed. I think, we've seen the Liberal Party come from what was sure electoral doom to winning a minority government, no small feats. And this election, of course, focused around Donald Trump and the threat of tariffs. So far in the 8 months of the premiership, I would argue that we haven't seen a lot of tangible results on Trump and trade. But so far in this session, as it wraps up today, Mark Carney, the Liberal government, did push forward Bill C-5. They got the Alberta-Ottawa MOU put forward, which I think is a good thing for the governments and the government of Alberta and Canadians at large. But now comes the actual political gamesmanship part. So we have to see now, how does Mark Carney and his new Liberal caucus, which consists of a lot of Trudeau-era people, how do they manage the fact of the different reactions to this MOU? We saw Tim Hodgson say this week that the whole Liberal caucus supports the MOU, but we know that's not true because we've seen Stephen Guilbeault and multiple Liberal MPs from BC and elsewhere criticize this MOU and pipelines generally. So now, in terms of the political calculus, how do they sow this apparent division within their caucus? How does Mark Carney, after what is a very successful year, manage his caucus and the political calculus going forward?
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. But George, your assessment?
Well, I think Mark Carney saved the Liberal Party from, for sure, losing. So you got to tip your hat to that. There's no doubt about it. That's a huge success. I think as far as what actually has happened since then, it's been a lot of talk and kind of fair enough. It hasn't been a huge amount of time, but there haven't been a whole lot of actual accomplishments, right? Like an MOU has been signed, bills have been tabled, but like not passed and enacted. So again, there's a lot of planning and talking. Mark Carney saved the Liberal Party. He promised to save Canada from Donald Trump. There's been no real evidence of his ability to do, like pull a rabbit out of a hat the way he kind of promised Canadians he would during the election. So I think that's what's going to come next is can he ran and won on the promise of being able to deal with Donald Trump. That was always going to be a near impossible task. I'm not going to pretend that anything other than that, but he kind of did pretend it was different during the campaign. And so we'll see how that goes. I think it's going to be a challenge for him. But yeah, I think so far in this year, he's got to be happy with the fact that he's still in government. I don't think anybody on the governing side expected that. And now it is, can he actually deliver for Canadians? That'll be the next question.
I also think Mark Carney saved Canada from Pierre Poilievre. I mean, he was a guy who was going to win if Trudeau had stayed in. He was the guy who was campaigning on Canada was broken. And by Trudeau stepping down and Carney stepping in, he gave Canadians, moderate Canadians, a choice between someone who had considerable experience on the global stage, who'd worked in business, worked in the private sector, worked in government, versus someone who had been a career heavily partisan politician, and Canadians made a clear choice on that. So I don't think that should be overlooked either, because that changed the trajectory of this country, and it changed, I think, the optimism that Canadians I don't think are ebullient or like bubbling over with, but I don't think there's the level of despair that there might have been if someone without a playbook for Trump had stepped in and we'd be operating under the Poilievre agenda.
Okay, I suspect you want to respond to that.
Yeah, so yes, I do. If Canada isn't broken, if things are just all fine and dandy now that Mark Carney's here, the Liberals have to actually prove that. If you're a young Canadian and you're concerned about immigration, the cost of living, like the strains on our housing system, how is Mark Carney, the Liberal government, actually going to make that better? Are they going to be able to deliver on these huge national energy projects? Can a pipeline get built despite divisions in the Liberal caucus? If Mark Carney, the Liberal government, can't define on these things, and these issues, let's be clear, Pierre Poilievre has defined the political issue matrix for the last 3-4 years, and if Mark Carney, the Liberal government, can't deliver on these issues that matter, particularly to young Canadians, can they maintain their electoral coalition and win the next election?
Do you want to add anything to that, George?
I don't know. It's a lot of ifs and buts, right? Like if there were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. Like I think that who knows where things would have gone. I think I go back to my original point. I think Mark Carney's done a lot of talking. There's been a lot of things said. There's been a lot of plans laid out. There's nothing to show for any of that yet. Which again, I think that's fair. I'm not holding him to that, but I think that he only has so many months before that where he's got to show, not just tell.
Yeah, and but also, the fact is that there is a division in the Liberal caucus right now. And to Cole's point, the Prime Minister not only needs to deliver to Canadians, but he has to even deliver to his own caucus, make sure that they get over the finish line together. There's a division in the
Conservative caucus, too. There's a guy, Matt Generou's not running again. There's a guy, Chris D'Entremont, who came over to the Liberal Party.
But they're not promising a...
There's a cabinet minister that's no longer part of the Liberal government.
No, but that's okay, but he stepped aside, and I think that's fine. I think, look, I don't believe that any caucus is ever going to agree 100% all the time on all the issues. But I think what the Liberal caucus does agree is that they support the Prime Minister. And some may have differing issues on different elements of it. I don't know. Does everybody in your caucus agree with Leslyn Lewis and all the crazy stuff that she believes? I'm not sure. But I think people are united behind Prime Minister Carney. They're united behind his economic agenda, and they will work through in a democratic way the solutions that they need to have. And there's room for people to say, yeah, I don't agree with that. It's not a hammer the same way the Conservative caucus is.
Listen, you use the word conservative. I'm going to use that to switch topic here right now because I also want to talk about Pierre Poilievre. You said if it weren't for what happened, he would have been Prime Minister in different circumstances, but he now faces a leadership review because he did not win the last election that was going to happen in late January. Take a look right now at some Angus Reid numbers that came out today because they are noting a softening in support amongst Conservative voters for Poilievre. This was in August, 68% believing that Conservative voters believing that he should stay on as leader. Fast forward to December, that drops by 10%, 58% now. And bearing in mind that Joe Clark resigned after getting 66.9%. So what does this say about the challenge ahead for Pierre Poilievre? I'll get you to start us off, Cole.
Sure. So I think Pierre is still in for smooth sailing for the leadership review in January in Calgary. And there's 2 points that I think speak to a change of tactics in the Conservative movement and the Conservative Party. After the election, we saw a lot of new Conservative, millennial Conservative MPs out there on political panels, on TV, and on shows that they normally wouldn't be on. Melissa Lansman, Shuv Majumdar, Adam Chambers, Jamil Javani. They're putting a different face forward on the Conservative Party and movement to say, look, it's not all about Pierre, although he is the leader and a lot of the comms will obviously focus around him. Another point that I have to reference in terms of the changing tone that we all talk about all the time is the mere fact that Pierre Poilievre actually showed up to the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner here in Ottawa. Hold on. This guy was able to show up, be self-deprecating, laugh at himself, and schmooze with journalists for the night. If that's not a change in tone, I don't know what is.
Okay, go, Susan.
I'm glad that's not a stock pick that I have to go put money on. But Pierre Poilievre is going to have to do a lot more than be able to make fun of himself occasionally at an event that every other political leader has been going to for decades, right? He's finally learning to get over himself. They're finally giving permission for other people to speak where it's not entirely the Pierre show. I think he will win the leadership race. It will not be those resounding numbers, and he'll have some explaining to do around that. But I don't think there's anybody. He was calculating enough to call a January leadership review after he lost the election and lost his seat so that no one could organize fast enough to dump him. But you do hear rumblings in that caucus. Everybody is not completely united with how he's doing things. And, you know, when he was asked, did he learn anything after Donald Trump crossed the floor, he said no. About his leadership style, no. Completely dismissive. So I remain skeptical if the Leopard can change his spots. He'll attempt a few things, but he'll survive the leadership convention and he'll be back. He'll be back in the spring.
I think a question that needs to be asked. I agree. He'll survive the leadership convention. Can he build the numbers? Because at the end of the day, that's what the party's looking for: more votes. What a million votes they're looking for in order to deliver government. Can you do it with Pierre Poilievre as leader? When you look at amongst conservative voters, a softening of support. George, what do you say?
Well, and that's it. And that's like the difference between a poll of even conservative voters versus who's going to be at convention is huge, right? So I actually agree that as far as the base goes, the people that go to convention, I mean, the same people that booed Danielle Smith for having the gall to try to work with the federal government, those people will be at that convention and they will vote to keep Pierre Poilievre as leader, for sure. That said, I don't think he's ever going to be prime minister because he's not building support. Sure, he's losing his caucus a bit. I think it's a bit strange to have Susan attack Pierre Poilievre for being controlling when we have a prime minister who's telling his cabinet ministers what color shoes they're allowed to wear. And I think that the power is keeping people around Mark Carney, and Pierre Poilievre doesn't have the power to hold people together, and that will slowly continue to erode. And until the Conservatives figure that out, they're not going to be a serious contender for government.
Okay, well, last word to George. As we look towards the holiday break, we are going to reconvene in January. But until then, Susan, Cole, George, thank you for this and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
You too.
And a closing nut, I want more than candies and nuts. Just saying.
That was a good one. I like that. Good line.
Okay, thanks, guys.